Welcome to the Metacast. We have our second guest in a row. Very fired up to have Paul here, friend of the podcast for quite a while. Bob and I have both known Paul for, gosh, I don't know, feels like a
Decades,
decade or so.
millennia.
Yeah. But what? Maybe Bob. I don't think Paul's that old. Let's not be that mean to Paul. Bob and I are old. Bob's really old, but I'm kind of old. So Paul's younger than all of us. So Paul, first and foremost, tell us. Actually, we know who you are, but tell our listeners a little bit about you, and then we'll dig into the episode.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thank you so much for having me. My background is in software engineering. I've been in software engineering for 20, 25 years, something like that. I focus on test automation, and I've done that for quite a while in consulting and training through my company, Beaufort, Fairmont. We also do staffing with IT folks, so software engineers, QA testers, test automation engineers, and managers and executives as well. So I've been doing that for quite a while. And look, I've been a fan of the show for a while, so I really appreciate being on. We have known each other for a long time. And one of my favorite things in the world is when I see Bob in real life and he gives me this great big, "Hey, Paul, how are you?" It's one of my favorite things in life. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you, man. Yeah. Let's dig in. What are we going to
do? It.
Josh, what are we going to talk about?
Well, first, Paul mentioned his company. How did that? Is that something you started? Was that something that you were co-founder? Like, what's the story there? Because that's something, as we have more and more leaders, and as we lean more into leadership, it's always interesting to hear and learn about how people started gigs and things.
Yeah, absolutely. So Beaufort Fairmont is a company that I started. Technically, it's been over 15 years now. And the fact is, over the last 12 or so, it's been focused on test automation and doing that for folks. And really, my background was in software engineering. I had a degree in computer science and enjoyed that lifestyle. I enjoyed being a software engineer. But from the very beginning, I got involved in extreme programming. So this was 2001, 2002, unit testing in 2000 and back around that time. And so just always loved test automation. It was just something that was always a part of me. And then people wouldn't stop paying me to do it. And so I said, well, why don't I form a company to be able to do that? And have learned a ton since then and kind of tried to build that up over time. So that's kind of how I got started. I'm happy to get into any more of the details that you want to. A part of it was, just knowing who I am and how I'm made up, right? So I was not made to sit in a cubicle and write code all day. That's how the world started back in 2000 for me, right? It quickly moved to open spaces and things like that. But I also found that leadership and helping influence the way things needed to go was very important to me and very near to me. And so I wanted to learn how to do that. And so one way to learn about that, one way to fit my personality better, was to move in a more independent direction and begin leading something on my own.
I remember when you started, Paul, and I have a question though. Beaufort Fairmont, what's the genesis of that? I've always wondered that, and I never had the courage to ask you. So where did it come from?
Yeah, so the first company that I started was called How to Geek On, right? And what it was is in 2007, 2008, I saw all these people out of work, and I wanted to help. I wanted to help in the IT world. And so that's what I tried to do. So How to Geek On, how to move on to that next geek thing was built into the name. And as it was failing, I realized very quickly that when you have a name so specific to what you do, it's really hard to pivot and do something different.
Yep.
So when I got to the next opportunity to try to do something, I wanted something that was more generic and that I could assign the value to and assign the meaning behind. So I tried to do something that would be generic for others, but be meaningful to myself. And so the meaning to me comes from the two cities in North Carolina, Beaufort and Fairmont. So I have people in both of those places, and both of those two places are important to me.
Oh, cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Very nice. Yeah.
That's much more meaningful than like a name like Kazi or something like that.
Don't you start with me, Robert.
I like that name. I like Kazi.
It's got meaning. Robert has given me. Listen, Bob and I go back and forth because when I started my company, I said, I tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to be J. Anderson LLC, like somebody I know who's R. Galen LLC. Like, I'm going to be a little bit more creative than that. So I had this very low bar I had to jump over, which was not using my name and attaching 3 letters to it. So the Kazi, listen, 4-letter domain, and I was happy with that. So
No,
there's
I'm with
already
you.
on
Yeah.
my website.
Oh, that's a real thing. That's a
I'm,
real thing.
yeah,
I understand. Like people trying to type out Beaufort Fairmont, I got it. I hear you. So
yeah,
I did go out and pick
yeah,
up bftft.com. So that's another one that you
nice.
can use for like just getting to the domain, bftft.com. But then nobody remembers where the F and the T and all that
Yeah,
goes. So
yeah,
yeah,
gotcha.
yeah, I hear
Yeah,
you.
gotcha. Okay, so test automation is one of those things that I feel very, very few companies get right. It seems to be one of those things where a lot of people launch into it with good intentions, but I've seen it executed well, maybe like 2 or 3 times. Is that the role that you play where you come in after, or do you normally come in before and help them get it right? Fingers crossed that you get more chances to come in and get it right from the start. But I have a feeling it's a fair amount of cleanup.
No,
What does that look like out there?
what actually works best is when people have tried and they didn't succeed. And then they come to me and say, hey, this is what we learned. This is what we thought we were learning. This is what we thought we were doing. What I've found, and you've seen this too, I'm sure, Josh, if you've seen test automation succeed, to me, what that means is you've seen test automation that's helpful at determining what's going on in the system, right? What changed in the system? That's the main thing that test automation is there. What change happened? And if you're seeing that very often and you're learning from it in a helpful way, then you can respond more quickly to that change. You can respond more quickly to your customers, respond to the marketplace, and all those things. So that's where I come in and what I want to accomplish. Now, once you've been there and you've seen that, it's an amazing place to be. The light comes on, you have, the angels start singing. Like it's an amazing place to be, because you realize, oh, right away I can see I made this mistake, or Joe made this mistake, or Mandy made this mistake, or whatever, and we can go back and fix it right away, very very quickly, and move on. And boy, isn't it cool how quickly we can move code through this pipeline, and isn't it cool how quickly we can actually affect the customer and the user in a helpful way. Most people have never seen that. Most people haven't seen that. So I find again and again and again, I sit down with companies and teams really where we talk about test automation and we have this one thing in our mind that is to replace testing, or it's to do testing faster, or it's to get rid of the bugs, or to get green, or to be, all these other things. And to me, that's not what it's about at all, because some of those things come when you find that wonderful paradise of test automation that works. Not all of them do. And some of the things that you find are complete misinterpretations and misunderstandings of where we were trying to go all along and what the benefits were we were going to get out of it. But like you said, like, who do I get to work with the most? I get to work with mostly people who have tried it before, and they said something we didn't work, and you seem to have some knowledge that I'd like to pick up on. So let's talk about that. And that's from the consulting space, and that's fun, right? It's fun to sit down with folks. When I started it, what I wanted to do was really like tell people what to do. I wanted to give all this knowledge and experience and like get people to understand and move forward, and I've learned over time it's quite a bit different than that, as I'm sure you both have learned as well. So
Is it getting better, Paul? I mean, I'm just sort of tagging on to what Josh said. It's always been a challenge, but my hope was I was more automation centric maybe 10 years ago, and I was doing testing, consulting, and things like that. But then I've gone into coaching, much more strongly into coaching and product management and things like that. So I looked at it as an opportunity area to get better. And I thought it was getting better. Companies were getting better, more patterns and things like that. So is it getting better over time? And has DevOps disrupted it? Sort of augmented it, the automation path? Any
you know
reactions
I
to that?
and I'm not going to have all the answers to all these things right now. But what I can say is that, and look, I think one of the most important things to be aware of when you've got some experience in your belt is to know you don't have all the experience, right? So my data set is limited to the folks that I've worked with, just like you all, right, and to the people that I talk to, the customers that I talk to. But I think it's a pretty good set of data. So what I've seen recently, so in the last 6 or 7 years, the big thing was a change over to using service oriented stuff, right? Or APIs. And so that happened much earlier within the software development community proper. So
Right.
if your software developers were working on it, but in the testing world, it took a long time for testers to start testing APIs. And then suddenly one day, everybody had done it, right? Like, so there was just this one day when it just flashed over, and now everybody does API testing all the time. And that was really the biggest changeover that I've seen, and the most, the one that's had the biggest impact. And it's because what you all know, right? Like, when you're able to test a product in a direct way, when you're able to interact with the product in a very direct way, straight into the code, um, you take a lot of variables out of the way. You find out what is really going on in there, what's really changing over time, what it's really doing, and it's much more direct. UI testing and end-to-end testing has always been slow, laggard, whatever else. And so it's the thing that we preferred the least to do, but it was the most approachable for so many testers
Yep.
and the most approachable for so many testing teams. And that, I think there's a whole set of layers of psychology and everything in there with that, and whatever. And I love talking through that as well. But I do think the API part was the biggest, and that was really hard to communicate before APIs were there. When you start talking about integration tests, and people are like, "So are these like unit tests?" It's like, well,
Right.
they may look a lot like that because we're using the same interface or a similar interface, but no, it's not a unit test. So I think when APIs came along and it put that interface, it put the ability to interact directly with the code under test in front of us. That made the biggest difference. Yeah, that was a huge flashpoint. You guys have seen this too, though. What have you seen? I mean, what are you seeing now? What are you hearing from guests and people that listen to you, customers?
I don't have a wonderful feeling that it's gotten better. I don't feel as if there's been a step change where all of a sudden now, as an industry, we're doing better than we were before. I still think it's a struggle. Unfortunately, it is something that too often is too late. Well, not too late. That's strong wording, but it comes later than people would prefer. So then you're trying to crowbar it into different things, and you're coming into an existing system and asking a new team or new talent within your organization to not only stay current with what's being built, but also you have this huge backlog of things you need to test. So there's so many times where it's not invested in up front. And so then you're playing this perpetual game of catch up and you feel like you're never there. And unfortunately, not many people actually get there. And then what happens is, because of the challenge and the complexity in that situation that most people find themselves in, they make choices and something has to lose. And when something has to lose with your quality and your automation testing, then the value of it just dwindles and dwindles, and eventually people end up pulling the plug.
Mhm.
So that's an unfortunate scenario that I see too often, which is why at least having a plan up front, and having that be a thing that you do. Again, that's one of those nirvana places where people feel like they never actually get a chance to make that happen, but there are opportunities to try and drive that. But yeah, it is one of those things that is underinvested in, unfortunately. And then, because I get called in a lot with companies where they've hit their head and they can't, release fast enough, or you just actually getting a release out takes like 4 weeks of manual testing. And so, well, there's a solution here, but that solution is going to require a significant investment.
Yeah, and I don't know if we lost Josh there. Suddenly we went to two of us. Hopefully he's still here somewhere. But I'll just comment on what he was saying there about planning and having a vision for these things. And I think that that's really important, right? What is the plan and what's the vision? Along with that is, what is the outcome we hope to achieve? And I heard you guys talking about this on one of the last episodes when you were talking about the 10 things. I think it was 2 episodes ago, the 10 things that are overdone in Agile. And one of them was basically, let's do a bunch of tasks and hope that that achieves something, when maybe what we should be doing is figuring out which ones are the most important and doing those instead. That's what I gained from what you all were saying. But I find that very much with test automation, the fact that we don't know what we're aiming for. And the thing that we're aiming for may not be what we need to aim for.
Yep.
So this is where we get back to leadership. So planning has to come with a vision. You have to have an object, a place that you're going, a goal, something that you're trying to approach. And really great leadership does that. So the teams that are the most successful that I work with are the ones with good leadership, of course, right? So I partner with that leadership. I work with them along and work with the team and partner with the team to try to make these things happen. But if the leadership's not there, you can almost guarantee that we're not going to be able to have a long lasting impact.
Absolutely. One of the things I was thinking about, Paul, is you mentioned earlier, like a lag factor in QA or testing, uh, time lags and things. And I think I've always seen that, right? There's always been, development lag to test lag in automation and APIs, et cetera. Um, and I think that's part of it. One thing I saw recently is I was talking to, so I think scale comes into play with lag factor. So I think if it's larger companies, there's more of an automation lag or a testing lag, just because of the burden they have historical applications or whatever. I was talking to a tester. I was coaching her at an unnamed company, an unnamed really large company in Europe, and I was just curious and what she was looking for. She was looking for synchronization between Scrum teams and dependencies, and it finally came out that they had a development sprint and a testing sprint. So the year was 2024,
Yeah.
and I haven't heard that language in like maybe over a decade, and my head almost exploded. And what I was I my reaction was, you need my help, and I'll give it away. I'll give it away for free. Josh, you probably hate this part, but and he's frozen for me. So
Me too.
and
Me too.
and giving it away for free. But I'm like, let me talk to your leader, and,
Take me to
and
your leader. I like it.
take me to your leader. And I didn't want to become, I didn't want to be a jerk, but I was like, gosh, there's so many better ways to think about that problem that'll remove the dependency issues and the delay issues that she was talking about. And and they finally scheduled something. I signed an NDA. It was free. I was like, no,
You
nothing. And
didn't. You
then
didn't, Bob. Free?
free, I know.
Oh, Bob.
I just got upset. But then they
Oh,
canceled. It's like, we're not ready to
Oh,
have this
they
conversation.
canceled free?
They
yeah.
canceled. No, they canceled free
Cancel
because
free.
because I was going to challenge this sort of I guess their strategies and stuff. But it's a leadership is a big part of that. That was a really
Yeah.
rambling way of agreeing with Paul. It often comes back to leadership. It's not the teams.
Yeah, it is, right? I mean, it comes back to leadership. The team's got to be on board, but that's
Yep.
leadership as well, right? Like
Yep.
that's leadership as well. But yeah, one of the things you mentioned there was scale and how scale is affected by some of these, or how scale affects some of these things. How scale can be a constraint, right? Like that's an interesting
Yep.
concept. How can scale be a constraint for you? Well, one of the things with me, I realized a while back that it's very difficult for me and for my practice to work with extremely large companies,
Yep.
right? For a number of different reasons, many of which and there's a business conversation to be had there, I'm sure. But in terms of the operational part of it or the mechanical part, and how we work together to improve something like test automation, or in your case, coaching agile teams or improving teams in general, when you have scale, when you have large companies, you have a whole different set of problems. And many of those I'm not familiar with and acquainted with. And a lot of it takes resources beyond one coach or two
Yep.
coaches or
Yep.
three coaches or two consultants. And so there's just not enough to go around a lot of times at scale. So, you and Josh probably have experiences from some of these much larger companies that, and a level of expertise with those. I've tried to tailor within my marketing message and within when I talk to people, hey, look, I like working with small teams. Now, if you're a startup, if you're a 5-person startup, you don't need me. I don't need to be. That's not going to
Right.
work, right?
Right.
We're not there yet. But if we're talking about a team of 20 people or 15 people or two teams of 50 people or something like that, sure, we're going to have a good conversation and be able to even up to 200 or 300 people in your dev department. But once we get much past that, and that's pretty big, I think. But once you get past that, I don't have the ability. Maybe I could, I don't know, but I'm not comfortable with it. That's not something I want to do. So yeah, I think there's a whole different set of resources and expertise there to solve that, like SAFE, right, Bob?
Why did you do that? I can't even see Josh, but he's there. I can hear the laughter.
Yeah. Yeah, I accidentally hit a button on my keyboard.
What are
And
you doing? I have a blue box with white, and the blue box pops up when you're talking.
It'll be interesting to see on YouTube how this shakes out when I do the editing. So
this is the worst Metacast I've ever done.
I don't know what's going on.
Oh gosh. So listeners, thanks for hanging in. Viewers, thanks for hanging in even more as we try and make this happen. So
no, you guys are great. Yeah.
Paul, there's a developer, there's a technologist that comes to you because you're a Bob Galen in test automation and software development. You're an old wizened vet, and this young whippersnapper comes to you, and they have a leadership opportunity offered to them, and they're looking for you to impart wisdom. Like these are the leadership lessons. These are the keys. These are the keys to the kingdom. What do you tell? You put your arm around their shoulders. You buy them a beer, or a scotch. And what are the top 3 or 4 things you say?
I mean, I think that. So first, I say you need to talk to somebody older than me, like Bob. I think that's the first thing.
Nicely done.
No, and then
well done.
The second thing that I'd say after that, I think, would be probably be patient, right? Ooh. So I think be patient would be the number one thing, and there's a number of reasons that I say that, and it's probably because there's a assumption on my part that if we have somebody who's young moving into leadership, there's probably a lot of energy behind it, a lot of desire to move forward, a lot of ambition. And those things can be great to help you move forward, but they're not the things that sustain you. They're not the things that build teams or build relationships over time. And those are the things that you'll need to be an effective leader. So, the first thing I'd say is be patient. And it's not just be patient with others, although that's central. It's be patient with yourself. So when you really get into, for me the hardest, for me, some of the hardest things that I've had to get through is internal, right? So what are the things that stop me from moving forward? What are the things that block me from helping others move forward? What are the things that I put on myself to keep the team or the group from moving forward, right? And I know that sounds a little abstract, but there's a lot of self-development that has to go on with leadership if you're truly going to be a leader. You're going to expect that of others. You better expect it of yourself first, and you better really, really get in there and do the hard work, because it's not easy to be a good leader. All the parts of your personality that are strengths, for some of these things, are going to get in your way in other ways, right? So there's just, I would say, be patient with yourself, be patient with the others around you. There's so many things with leadership. You're not, I guess the other thing I would say is there are many great characteristics. There are many characteristics of great leaders. So if you look through leaders just in general, and the work that I've done to try to understand leadership, I probably need to do a lot more, but John Maxwell was one of the folks that I read and worked with on that. I had 2 folks that were leaders earlier in my career that have both been through West Point, become officers in the military. Learning from them, I kind of found there's this set of characteristics, and they're things like: are you organized? Are you able to communicate well? Do you have emotional empathy? Are you able to solve problems? Are you able to discern when you're not supposed to solve problems? Discernment, right? Like the patience. There are all these other things that come along with it. You're not going to have all of those. You don't have all of them. And so you're going to have to find other people that can supplement those things for you. And you're going to have to understand that there's a nature there's a nature to how leadership works, in the sense that um, the things that you do well, you're going to be more willing to do, and the things you're more willing to do, you're going to be able to do well. And all the other things are important too, right? They still have to
Right.
be done. Like in my business, I don't want to do the bookkeeping, right? Like that's not something that's going to work for me. I don't really like doing sales. I'll do it, I'm functional at it, and I do my best to enjoy it at the time, but it's not a core skill of mine. I'm an
Right.
introvert, but I have to do very extroverted things. And so you have to find a way to balance that, or get other people to help you. So you're never going to have all the characteristics. Learn what they are, and then decide which ones you're willing to continue doing, and find other people to help out with the others. I guess those would be the first things, but be patient, study leadership. Um, those would be some of the big things.
That
Talk to
was
Bob.
that. No, that was a good. I mean, I love that dialogue, the share, Paul. I'm going to add two. Just I'm observing from you, and you're a good role model. You've always struck me as being incredibly thoughtful, and I'm seeing that in this Metacast. And then you're humble, and I think both of those are great leadership attributes as well.
Well,
Uh,
the beginnings of wisdom are humility, and if you want to learn more about leadership, find pride will get you really into that, right? Be prideful about something to see where it goes with your leadership. You'll learn pretty quick, like
ex-
maybe.
exactly.
Yeah.
Is Josh? I'm checking. Are you still there?
I am still here, Bob. Yes.
So
What would you say,
I
Josh? Oh, sorry, I interrupted.
no. Go ahead, Josh. I wanted to get him in the game.
So leadership, I'm writing a book, and the second chapter is what is great leadership. And I started to dig into what that is, and I
Are we calling that the Bob Galen chapter?
no, because it's like two sentences, so it can't be the Bob Galen chapter.
Exactly.
It's the anti Bob Galen. It was one of those things. As I started to think about what to write, I was like, man, there's so much I could write. But then
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to boil it down, and I'm not there. I don't have the finished product yet. But what I view a great leader as, and the rest of the book explains how to make this happen. But the one North Star that I'm trying to tie people to is a great leader challenges and inspires others to be better tomorrow than they are right now. And I'm still working on that, but that's the North Star. That's your job. Your job isn't to be the person out front, and maybe you have to be that to achieve that, but that's the that's the single thread that I'm trying to drive of if you have that in the back of your head and you find ways to make that a reality, then you're gonna succeed. Now, that's one of those things super easy to say, really hard to make a reality, which is why the book has like 20 chapters, right? As I try and give people tips and tools of how to make that a reality. But as I'm trying to boil it down into like one recitable, retainable thing that I can have as a new leader or as a growing leader, if I just anchor in on this, I'm good. So that's what I've been working to center on. Again, I'm still working on it, trying to flesh it out, but that's the current view that I'm looking at the world with.
So inspire and challenge others.
Yeah. And I put
To
challenge first because
challenge and inspire.
because I don't think you're really helping people if you're not challenging. And challenging others is a delicate, difficult thing to do that many people shy away from. So I want to put that up front of you have to challenge people for them to grow. It's
Well,
just it's hard. Human nature is we get comfortable and we get complacent, and not with malintent. It's just comfort is a nice thing. I like to be comfortable, but that's a yeah. So that's where I'm at right now.
So then, do you
but I
mind
think
if I Do you mind if I challenge you then?
Bring it on.
Or
I mean,
challenge
that's the
this
whole thing.
idea? It may not be challenging you. It's just challenging the idea.
Yeah.
So, do leaders have a function outside of challenging and growing people?
If you're and this, I feel terrible doing this, so I'm going to try and find a way not to respond to your question with a question. But right now, like
That's all right if you
that's
do.
what's
That's
coming
okay.
to my head.
Dialogue,
Is
yeah.
that, to me, leading means you're out front, physically, mentally charting a path, charting a course into the unknown. And that doesn't always have to be challenging to others. But one of the biggest challenges I see when I'm coaching other leaders is a lack of vision, a lack of clarity for their product, their company, which ultimately means a lack of vision and clarity for the team. And they get into this mode of what I just call just doing shit. Like, hey, we're just doing shit. Some of it is cool, some of it works, some of it doesn't. But hey, like, we're doing things and we feel good. So that's the outputs thing versus the outcomes. But yeah, that's, to me, as a leader, that's where I view of there's a strong responsibility that I don't think is hit enough, which is why I'm really trying to hit it up front. And again, I just wrote that like last week, so it might never make it into the book, but I'm trying to find ways to really, and it might be projecting, I'm trying to challenge leaders to become like not strong, but really good leaders by, and I'm trying to find a different way to say leading without using the
By
word
looking
leading.
ahead. Yeah, looking ahead.
Yeah.
I think that's my experience of 2024 would very much mirror what you're saying, in that I think we do need more people looking ahead farther, and being intentional about where to go. And it's our leaders who should do that. Absolutely. I guess where I was coming from is, we mentioned we might talk a little bit about this concept before we got on the show. One of the things that I read from John Maxwell was, if you want to know how good a leader you are, go lead volunteers. And so I thought that was, I mean, I don't know. I guess I thought it was interesting when I read it a million years ago. And then I had the opportunity to do it. So Bob, I think at one point led the Triangle Software Quality Association. And I led it for a few years too. And I appreciate all your work there, Bob. And that's been a huge thing for the Research Triangle for a lot of years. A lot of people benefited from it. And we've had a number of leaders go through there that were terrific. Mary Thorne did it. I know you guys are close with her and others. But that was one of the first opportunities that I had to lead in volunteering. And it was different, right? So I remember an opportunity earlier in my career where I was a manager and I had the title, right? And you can lead by title. If you have enough stripes on your shoulder, people are going to do what you say, right? Like, that's just kind of how it works. But there comes a time when you don't have the stripes, or your stripes are just the same as somebody else's, or somebody's got more stripes and you still need to get them to do something different than what they're doing if you've got a clear path and clear understanding or whatever it is, right? But when I changed into a role of project manager into my career and had that opportunity, that was just the most nerve-wracking thing that I had ever done in my life, because I didn't directly affect the people that were working for me, right? Like, I couldn't fire somebody, I couldn't hire them, I couldn't impact their performance plan or their development or whatever else. So it was this really strange sort of leadership where I had no name that said you had to do what I said. Then moving into a role like with TISCA and with other volunteer organizations I've had since then, working with the YMCA with kids coaching, that's certainly a volunteer thing, and the kids are not going to do what you say unless you have a certain set of skills to kind of get them to do it. But working with volunteers in general is much more difficult. They can quit anytime they want. They don't have to show up. If they do something, you you're you may or may not benefit from it, right? They may say they're going to do something and not do it. They have other things that are higher priorities. Their
Yep.
job, where they make money, is a higher priority than where they do their volunteer work. And so, one of the things that I learned from that was that everything that I got from a volunteer was a gift. It was all just gravy. Every single thing was gravy. And when you start looking at the people that do things for you that way, that really changed. That changed a lot for me. Just like looking around in the rest of the world and what's happening for me, what's happening to help me out with whatever it is I'm doing, and what am I doing to help others out, right? Because you're working with a volunteer, maybe you're the one that is in a leadership role, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they see you that way or that they understand things that way or whatever. You can't necessarily hold them accountable the same way. So that was a huge change for me. I don't know how we got down that road, um, but
No,
yeah,
I want to weigh.
there's
No, I want to weigh in real quickly. I mean, as you were talking, Paul. I mean, I've led volunteer groups. I still do to some degree. Like there's something I lead called the Moose Herd, or partially lead, and it's very different. So I think leaders, you can become a better leader by adopting different leader roles or positions like that. Uh, it's harder. It's different. It actually changed the way how I receive work as a formal leader. Like I'm more grateful for what gets done because I
oh
was
yeah,
grateful from a volunteer perspective,
yeah,
and,
yeah,
and I'm
yeah,
and I'm less judgmental. So it actually has balanced me as a leader.
yeah.
I want to have a shout out for John Maxwell, Metacasters. John Maxwell is this prolific. He's written like 50 or more books. He's got a Christian back-ish background, but just great leadership. I have probably 10, 15 of his books myself. I love Failing Forward is one of my favorites that he talked about. He talked about how you mentally view failure. So that's a great reference from Paul. And then, Josh, I wanted to really quickly bring up coactive coaching has a leading from the front. They have a model that they talk about leading from inside, and Paul touched on that earlier, like the inside out nature of it, like lead yourself. What are you doing? The inside work. And then they have like leading from the front, leading from the side, leading from the right side, left side, and leading from the back. And there's different postures there. That might be something to read for your book,
Right.
because
Okay.
what you were describing to me was leading from the front, vision, mission, product direction, things like that. And then but you're not always there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I like that spatial in my head, the metaphor of, I ask myself a lot of, I'm leading from where right now? And I
Mhm.
also ask myself, do I need to be leading from a different position? Right? Am
Mhm.
I overly leading here and there? So the spatial dynamics have helped me a lot.
There's a dynamic. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about where am I leading from, but one of my favorite things to do is to allow the team to figure it out, to allow the team to figure out the path forward, allow them to step forward on their own and not be the one out front, sit back. And that's very confusing. So I had another volunteer opportunity recently. Won't get into the details of it, but totally fun, wonderful group of people from all walks of life. And look, I've spent a lot of time in technology like you folks have, right? Um, now I've lost Bob. That's no good.
this,
Uh,
this is the craziest episode ever. I went away. I'm frozen. I'm a blue box, and Bob disappeared. I don't know what's going to happen. So this is. I tell you what, Paul. The most exciting thing. This is the opposite. Is the editing work I've got ahead of me, trying
yeah,
to
good
pull
luck.
these
Good
together.
luck. But yeah, I was just going to say I had this opportunity to work with volunteers in another situation. It was volunteers from all different walks of life, people who had all different types of careers. They had all different education levels. They had all different backgrounds, old, young, all of it together. And when you work with a group like that, it's just this entirely other thing. But many of them had only experienced a leader being out in front and telling you what to do. In fact, most of them wanted me to tell them what to do, and you could read it on them, you could smell it on them. They wanted me to tell them what to do, and when I didn't, it was uncomfortable for them, right? and I'm okay with discomfort. That's part of what leadership is understanding sometimes you're going to be uncomfortable to get the job done, right? But what I wanted more than anything was for them to be able, well, not more than anything, but one of the things that I was hoping for from that group was that more could be done without me. And so I had to back out of the situation to allow them to do it more. And I tried that along the way. But little things like that, I love Bob's concept of where am I leading from? We should, what is that? WILF. Can we get bumper stickers with that? Where am I
Sure.
leading from?
Yeah. So
Exactly.
one of the things that's interesting that I clearly have to work on is that I'm not trying to bring the message of you need to be out front. What I'm trying, what I see missing most often in leadership is establishing that vision. Now, to me, great leaders establish, maintain that vision, and then get out of the way. And so that's that challenge that I've got to work on as I create the content of the book to back that, or I reshape the wording, probably a little bit of both. But that's, to try and put a bow on this has been really good to get the feedback from you all based on the wording that I have right now and the images that drives and how I need to adjust and change that because yeah. So I've got a real
Well,
passion around that.
and the other thing here, Josh, is that what I say and what Bob says may have nothing to do with what you need to be saying, right? Like maybe you're saying exactly what you need to say. I don't know. I'm not in your shoes. I do think that just like what you see, that there is a much bigger need for exactly what you're talking about. So, please take it with a grain of salt.
Well, I've got to get people past chapter 2. If I get them to chapter 2 and it's 2 or 3 sentences and they're like, well, this is total horseshit, they're not going to read through. So, but again, so beta readers are coming. If you're interested in being a beta reader, to any of the listeners that are out there, hang in because towards the end of July, that's going to be a thing that we're going to be sharing and getting some feedback because we're going to iterate on this book, which I'm excited about.
So do we still have Bob?
Bob,
Yeah, I'm here.
Bob is back. Bob is here. So yeah,
I'm
this
here.
is.
I don't know if you can see me. This is the weirdest technology podcast.
Look, this happened to me this is why I got into testing, was because every time I sat down near anything, it would break. So
it's Paul. Okay, all right. So Paul's the problem here.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Hey,
All right,
Josh,
Bob, bring us home.
stick a fork in it.
Yeah.
We're gonna stick a fork in it. First, I wanna thank Paul. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I always, it reminds me how much I enjoy your company. So thank you
Me
for
too.
coming. All
Thank
right.
you so much for having me.
So everyone, we're gonna stick a fork in it. So from beautiful downtown Cary, North Carolina,
And beautiful downtown Fuquay, Varina, North Carolina.
And beautiful southern Cary, North Carolina.
Ooh.
I'm Bob Galen.
I'm Josh Anderson.
And I'm Paul Merrill.
All right. Shake and bake.
And bake.
And bake. Get it up there, Paul. Get it up there. Get it up there. There you go.
Okay.
All right. Take care of you.